Sisters and brothers in the English ministry, peace be with you. Many of you have received my private message over the past week, especially when we were having our holiday season. Yeah, if I have your private line, that is. Many of you have received my private invitation to join two of our upcoming important events at EM. One is our EM retreat, which takes place on November 11th to 12th. Well, of course, this is not the upcoming one. This is the one that we had last year. I don't know if you still remember things from last year. Sometimes we forget about things so quickly nowadays. This was last year. And you see, the people joining this retreat, they don't wear face masks. But during last year, this time, it was still most of the face masks all the time. Only take off face masks for this photo. Remember those times? And for the past 3 years, we couldn't have a proper retreat because of the COVID situation. So even like last year, it was just a retreat for 1 day. So it's we went to that area to see the sites of the Dr. McKay because it was an anniversary last year. This year is proper post-COVID retreat. 2 days, 1 night, staying outside. And we are actually visiting our Lian Presbyterian Church's new facility. So it is in Sanzhi area. We have the church during COVID time has built a new building that is designed kind of discipleship training or retreat center, you may say. So it is a good place. It has a very good room, boarding, and a nice, tranquil environment, nice classrooms for activities and sharing and everything. So I sincerely send out this invitation one more time. Now not in private line, openly for you to register November 11th to 12th. And this is an important event. And another one that is coming up is our Christmas lunch. Yeah, so we have our Christmas lunch, as it states here, on 23rd of December. 2 days before day, we'll have a lunch in a nice house where we can share fellowship together. I sent out these invitations last week to many of your private lines. So if you don't have my line, please come to me also after worship. We can add friends and we can communicate better that way. Many of you have responded favorably. Some people have responded by saying that, and that actually makes my heart really sad. Some people have responded to me saying that $600 for a Christmas was too much for me. Yeah. So you see how difficult it is, even within our EM congregation. Very, very different financial situations. So when the committee was making a decision, we were happy that this lunch is actually a very expensive lunch. The church is able to sponsor half. The committee members are excited. We want to push this. But as I approach you and encourage you to register, here people, even among this family, that it is too expensive for them, $600 for a meal. And so my position is that I still encourage you to register. If you have financial difficulties, let me know. Yeah, I will try for you. Yeah. I want everyone to be included in this Christmas meal if you are time and our retreat. Note that we will close our registration next Sunday because it is approaching. We want to be to plan it really well. So, all Jesus, according to our dictionary, brought us to this nice wedding banquet. So over the past 3 weeks, we have been, do you remember, together with Jesus Christ in Jerusalem. Over the past 3 weeks, told 3 consecutive parables in response to the challenges from the religious leaders in Jerusalem. It was a really rare chance to be able to preach consecutively from Jesus' parables, especially these 3 not very favorite parables of anybody. You have Jesus' favorite parables? You probably have, like the younger son went off, and the older son. You know, we have our personal favorites, but very few people, I would say, will choose one of these past 3 parables as their favorite parables. They are really difficult. Jesus told these parables in the context of this contention with religious leaders. Jesus really comes into the city, comes into the affairs. He really comes to prepare for his death. These parables are exactly the ones that finally provoked those religious and nailed Jesus to the cross. So these are not, friendly nighttime bed stories that has a happy ending. But nevertheless, Jesus' parables are really open. The beginning of the parable, it says, Jesus spoke to them again in parables. So it is the 3rd one, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. Okay, so Jesus' parables opens up lots of different possibilities. Of course, we will follow along with the story in this parable. But first of all, pause here. So the king wedding banquet. Do you remember your own wedding banquet? Or do you remember the wedding banquet you have ever joined before? An exciting event? A stressful event? What kind of role do you usually play in such a... What kind of different roles have you ever played in different kinds of wedding banquets? This past week has actually become one of the changing points in me and my wife's life. There's a private important event that happened to us this past week. Not that my wife is pregnant again. I guess many of you are still begin to guess, oh, another important event in your marriage life. What could it be? The thing is actually, my mother-in-law, whom you know, has stayed with us in our house for the past 1.5 years. She has returned to Tainan. So she was so kind. Our 2 children, our older sister and the younger brother, she has managed to actually moved from her own home in Tainan, come to Taipei to live with her son-in-law together in a house and to help take care of our children. She was very nice to offer that. But it came to a stage that she thinks it's about time she should go back and she should resume her normal life in Tainan and enjoy her time. And we, me and my wife, should take responsibility for our children. So my wife has also made an important decision. Finally took an official leave to take care of our son over the past week. So she is now full-time mother, no longer serving in the church that I shared with you about our previous church in the Tianmu area. This was actually a totally new stage in our marriage life. Wedding banquet. That was just a one-time event. No matter how sumptuous, how big, happy or busy or stressful it is, it just marks the beginning of your marriage, your lifetime of marriage. And then beginning from the wedding day, there are other things and so many exciting things still to come, isn't it? In a marriage life. A marriage life can change dramatically with the birth of a baby, the change of job or your change of relationship, the passing of an important member of the family. A wedding banquet is just one day, but that day is memorable in many ways. I still clearly remember my wife and I, when we decided to get married, we were talking about wedding planning. And you know, this Kingdom of Heaven wedding banquet story has so much similarity with an Asian culture, you know, an Eastern expectation of a father. You know, I still remember dearly when my wife and I was discussing about the wedding banquet, we learned for the very first time when we were discussing the main characters in a wedding banquet are the parents on both sides. You know, especially in a Chinese context, in a Taiwanese context, the marriage, who are the hosts of the marriage, the parents on both sides. I still remember clearly, I was feeling, well, isn't it my wedding? Isn't the most important thing for the wedding my vow to love my wife and my wife's vow to love me, one another? Isn't that the core of the wedding? But quickly we found out, no, that's actually not the only most important thing. And we also quickly find out parents on both sides. No, not beneficiary. They are the financial support of the whole whole marriage, the whole wedding banquet. In Taiwan, in our culture, we usually even say, if you the wedding banquet good enough, invite guests somehow rich enough, you might be even able to make some money out of your marriage, out of the banquet. So you see, when you talk about wedding, it is so culturally laden. It is related to so much cultural expectation. Post is of what kind of establishing of relationship that was. So Jesus' parable opens this whole hosts of different angles and different considerations. We think about a wedding banquet. We can all think about it for ourselves. If we were to hold a wedding banquet again, if we can hold an ideal wedding banquet after the effect, how would you rehold it? How would you make your wedding banquet be? At least, according to Jesus' parable, we can continue to try again and again. As it says, the kingdom of heaven is like a wedding banquet. So every time when we gather here at church, we can regard it as a wedding banquet. Every time when we worship here, when we have fellowship with one another, when we have table fellowship, when we eat together in the Christmas lunch, when we share our EM retreat, we can retry. We can retry that wedding banquet. Was last year's retreat a successful event? Well, maybe some people find it, yeah, it's really successful. I played my part in the EM retreat. Now, some people might have some issues. Oh, well, the travel, the time management and everything. There's some room for improvement. Then consider yourself part of the party and continue to improve on this wedding banquet of Jesus. So the kingdom of heaven is like a wedding banquet. Specifically, it's like a king, a wedding banquet for his son. So the son is very, very backstage in this kind of wedding banquet. So this king sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come. They refused to come. So here is an invitation. Yeah. So whenever we hold any kind of party, whenever we have any kind of meal, we need to consider carefully our invitation list. Yeah. Who are included? What kind of people? So this king originally also had an original invitation. In the context of Matthew, that was clearly those religious leaders of the day. Yeah. They should be considered as invited. Israel is chosen to become God's people. Those were the people who considered themselves as on the invitation list originally. Yeah. So what's the issue here in this wedding banquet? People refuse to come. In fact, that was the theme for all three of the parables in the past. In the first week, there were two sons. One said, I won't do what my father wants me to do. But later, he changed his mind and he still did what the father required. And so there is this acceptance of this invitation or refusal of the invitation. And acceptance and refusal for what kind of the main thing in all these three parables. So the king were refused. So what then happens? Then he sent more servants. So like last week, quantity does not help. Yeah, if I send out an invitation for you to come to the, if you have made up your mind, then if I send out the invitation again, change the matter. Try something else. Yeah, I need to convince you something. So it does not help. So they sent more servants and said, all those who have prepared my oxen and fattened cattle, and everything is ready. Come to the banquet. This king is still trying. It still sends out this invitation. So it's not like Jesus Christ totally abandoned Jerusalem and did not come to the place. He still comes to the place. He overturned tables. He challenged these religious leaders, asked them to reconsider. So the invitation was sent out again. So it's not just a one-time invitation. It is now at least. And here the convincing argument is everything is prepared. Everything is ready. So you don't need to do anything. You just come over. The important is to fill up. Is for, how important it is in our Taiwanese country to hold a wedding. I still remember we were calculating how many people would actually come. So if there are only about less than 100 people who would come, then probably don't rent the 10th floor, right? Because the 10th floor will accommodate 300 or more people. If only 100 people come and you rent the 10th floor, looks a little empty. So you need, how many people come relates to the face of the king. So this is very Eastern, very Asian kind of parable. So what's the response? There are basically two different kinds of response. One is, I will call neglect. So they paid attention and went off. They have decided that, well, I don't want to come to this party. It has nothing to do with me. What were their attention on? So one went to his field, another to his business. So he cared about their work or their daily living. Or according to other passages of the Bible, you can worship both God and man. So they pay no attention to Jesus' invitation, this king to the wedding. So this is one kind of response, a response of neglect, not willing to take that as an invitation. And the second one is a little bit more serious. It's actually very strange in terms of a wedding banquet. It shouldn't happen. And so this is, after all, a parable. It's not an everyday life story. It is more like a story that is a parody of a bigger picture. So the rest is and kill. You wouldn't do that if somebody invited you to a wedding, right? So this is obviously referring to the opposition in Jerusalem. Jesus will finally die in the hands. Yeah. Jesus is almost saying, so you see, you seized me, mistreated me, and killed me. That is your response to God? Is that your response? So this is not simply a response of neglect. This is a response of hostility or confrontation in that sense. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Oh, that was very interesting. The oxen are still cooking, and the king was able to wage a war. So some commentators said this verse specifically was not in Jesus' original story. Some people noticed the very interesting fact that city is mentioned. So what kind of city? Are those guests from another city, all from another city? So does this king invite a group of people from Tainan, for example, from another city? Yeah. So what is that? Some people will especially take this verse and say, you see, this is a very clear sign that the book of Matthew is written after 70 AD. So what does it mean? There is a very important event in the early church. 70 years, or 70 years after Christ's birth. What was that event? The Jerusalem temple was seized and destroyed by the Romans. So for Jewish people, that was like their second destroying of the temple. The first is in their ancient history. The first destroying of the temple was in the Old Testament. But now, here, after Jesus' death, after 40 years of Jesus' death, there's a second taken down of the Jerusalem temple by the Roman government. So at that time, of course, this is a huge event for the Jewish believers, and of course also for Christians. In fact, Christians and Jewish people fight over the reason why the temple was destroyed. They point fingers at one another. So you are to fault. You challenge the Roman government. You disturb peace here. So people discuss with one another why the temple was destroyed. So people take this verse as a clear that the book of Matthew is written after the Jerusalem temple was destroyed. So this story not only was originally in Jesus' mouth, but this story is taken to reflect further on events that is in the time when the book of Matthew was written and read. So Jesus' parables does not live only in Jesus' time. Jesus' parable taken and continue to be read and reflected upon in different times, reflecting on recent events. We can also continue to take parable to reflect on our situation and our recent event. So city here is referring to destroying, is referring to the destroying of the Jerusalem temple in year 70 AD. Then he said to his servants, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone find. Okay, so the story continues to develop. So these religious leaders that were originally chosen did not deserve, they refused the invitation. They even upright, confronted with Jesus Christ. In the beginning of the church, how the gospel, originally addressed to Jewish leaders and Jewish people, comes to Gentile world, comes to everybody. So the invitation now goes to street corners, goes out. So if those people who are in the church, so sometimes our pastors will reflect upon this passage this way. A pastor comes to the church. Of course, the first thing, as I shared last week, the first thing the pastor will do is to try to know everyone, is to try to know the life of each and every person. And over the past year, I also often hear stories of people used to come to EM, but now no longer come. Some people will come to me, oh, there was that person who used to come to EM. I can introduce you to them. I will definitely say, please introduce them to me. And often what happens, I meet with that person, and that person a lot about the past EM of some sort, past stories. In the past we did this and we did that, and then something happened, and then I feel, no, place that I want to continue to come. And people will ask me, so if Pastor, can you do something? Can we try to find it back? Of course, I'm willing to try, but most of the time, those kind of people, they live in a memory of the past, right? They remember certain things in the past, regard those deciding factors of their continuing to belong to this community, their refusal, basically to continue to become a member of this community. And this community is constantly changing. As Jesus said, the invitation continues to go to find anybody. Later on, it will say the invitation continues to come out, and people are continue to be invited to join this community. So pastors read this parable in this way. The kingdom of heaven is like, we will continue to invite. We will continue to notice, go to the street corners, to find what we can to join this family. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good. Remember the weeds and the wheat? Matthew is very, very conscious of the fact that when the gospel goes to the Gentile world, that means you cannot keep things clean as you want. So in the past, maybe you can keep it really clean. It's all familiar people. We all abide by certain house rules here of Israel. But as long as the gospel goes outside, as long as we spread the gospel outside, we preach and we invite people from outside, this place will never be as clean as before. The bad as well as the good. The weeds and the wheat, I hope you still remember those parables. Jesus tried to encourage the growth of the good and the bad together. So what should we do when there is a bad member among us? We don't push them out. We try to grow together with them. We try to postpone our judgment of them and leave that judgment to God. Matthew's emphasis, you can the bad and the good will be together in the wedding banquet. All kinds of are included. The hall was filled. That is what God wants to see. We do not want a clean house with very, very few. We want a little bit of noisy and dirty house perhaps, but the house should be filled. That's the king's mind. However, there's a second stage. Sometimes when you read Jesus' parable, you say, if you can just end here. It's all well. It's a good story. Yeah. But then continues. Yeah. But when the king came in to see the guests, it's a wedding banquet after all. He noticed the man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, "Did you get in here without wedding clothes?" The man was speechless. So and did not even have an excuse. Yeah. Oh, because I didn't have time to go back to change. Yeah. And continue to discuss what are those wedding clothes. Is it outward garment? Is it we need to dress up to worship or something? Or is it something else? Yeah. Notice in the beginning, when Jesus was talking about the original invitation list, the original invitation list was compiled. Yeah, so the religious leaders, the Israel, those people are. Notice now, the requirement of the choosing is now different. Originally, it was chosen by God. Now the requirement is our response to God. So our faithful response. If we can conform our life, if we can join into the party and make the party our own party, that becomes the new requirement when the gospel of God goes into the entire world. So then the king told the attendants, "Buy him hand and food to the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen." So this is Jesus' parable. After Jesus spoken these 3 parables consecutively, the religious leaders, they were really, really mad. They made up their mind that, okay, so this is the person that we should get rid of. So Jesus' teaching and Jesus' confrontation with the religious leaders, I would say, we can take one step back. We can rethink the wedding banquet. As an EM family, with our retreat and with our Christmas lunch, with our everyday fellowship and worship, we can always continue to rethink what kind of wedding we want it to be. What kind of wedding banquet do we want to throw? Who would be on our invitation list? Are we going out into the street corners to include the bad as well as the good so that the house will be filled? Are we ready to put up with not so tidy, not so clean, not so familiar faces in this family? I think it's the call. Jesus continues only to the religious leaders. Jesus also talked to us today. So I leave with you a few questions for you to think about. First of all, how do we usually notice that God is inviting us? This is a wedding banquet that God sends out the invitation. The invitation was not received very well. There are refusals due to neglect, and there are refusals because of hostility. How do we usually notice God inviting us, and how do we usually respond to God's invitation? If the kingdom of heaven or the EM family or our life is a party thrown by God, what role do we usually play in this kind of party? How do we envision God's party to be like? And what to play? I hope our EM family will be a little bit closer to Jesus' parable today, every year at a time. This year we are going to hold a retreat. You continue to tell me it's too expensive. Oh, the time is not really well or something like that. We can continue to improve on our EM retreat and improve our family. So this can become a welcoming place, and not just a welcoming place, but also a place that tries our best to conform to God's wedding protocols? Yeah. What kind of conformity of our lives when we attend God's party so that it can become really God's party for us today? Shall we pray? Father, you prepare everything for us. You especially prepare a family of faith, and you send out that invitation to each one of us. Lord, because of the refusal of the first religious leader, so this party will go to the Gentiles, will go to all kinds of different people. So this cannot be a really clean place. Lord, however, help us to become a member of this party together with one another, and help us to conform to your standards, your party, so that our life can become an enjoyable event and welcoming event that celebrates your son's wedding. This in Jesus' name. Amen.